too. Now you see, this shows the Messiah as stained with his own blood, but though the warrior very clearly appears stained with the blood of others, not his own, the blood of vanquished foes, still that warrior may be the Messiah, and the reason it would be the Messiah is because when we read of the coming judgments in Revelation, and even when you look at Zechariah 14 when he comes, he is opposing the nations of men. He's coming in judgment. And we can see a lot of things in these verses. We can see things that we may construe to be the sufferings of Christ. Now, see, I don't suppose the conqueror is Yahweh or the Messiah. I say he is. And the reason being is because of the picture. But when we talk about the Redeemer, we need to understand something. You see, this is at the end of Isaiah. And Judah here has already been described as going into captivity, and they got out of captivity, and it was Persia who brought down Babylon, and Israel, Judah, was released. And all the way through, from Daniel to Cyrus, Israel was totally delivered. They went back to Judah, and they built, they ended up finally building the temple. They took up back in Jerusalem, and they were restored there. And that's redemptive. That's a redemptive act. They were forgiven. Now, the lost tribes of Israel, which is the northern tribes, that never happened to them. Now, there are, as Israel, some of the Jews and those who monitor this have said that there's still some of the tribes there, and they always were. But paramount to the northern tribes, they were scattered among the nations because of the judgment by Sennacherib's father, who had invaded and took them captive and carried them away. So these are the differences there. And so that's the context now that we're looking at. And we're also looking at the Lord who judges in the valley of Jehoshaphat, the Lord who judged Edom because of the evil Edom did to Judah in betraying them to Babylon. And the context of the verses is judgment and the time of judgment and the time for the Lord's redeemed to be fulfilled. Now, these are the main things we're looking at. Because Edom is going, they got judged. And they betrayed Judah to Babylon and even joined Babylon. Yes. And so they betrayed their own brother. And so these are the things that we look at. So when we look at this, we can see this mighty warrior. Now let me read verse 1 first before we go any further again. Now this is the beginning. Who is that comes from Edom? Now remember, Edom betrayed Judah, and they sided with Babylon against Judah. And it could have been because of their own survival. They were afraid to be overtaken, but they joined them. So who is he that comes from Edom with dyed garments from Bozrah? This is that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength, I that speak in righteousness made mighty to save. Now that verse there can only be one. We've only got one Messiah, and that's Yeshua, Jesus Christ. And the way the picture is, he's coming back from Edom. Now, so we see this mighty warrior is the Lord. And we look at this. The valley of Jehoshaphat is also going to be involved here. And we'll be dealing with that in further verses of this. And he's covered in the blood of his enemies because this is the day of the Lord. This is the day of the Lord can be any time when we look at a judgment that happens. And when God destroys them, that is the day of the Lord. And the day of the Lord happened when he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. The day of the Lord happened when he was going to destroy Nineveh, but Nineveh repented. So God repented. But then, I think it was 70 years later, Nineveh was destroyed because they forgot why they repented, and God destroyed them. Now, see, there is no secret here that from the standpoint of Edom and the standpoint of Judah, the animosity is over blood. Because it was Edom who had betrayed them. Just one. You know, they're not... There's others. But the ones we're concerned about is here. And so here, the person approaching, you know, he's great in word and deed. He speaks in righteousness, in the zeal of his holiness, threatening judgment to the oppressors, and promising salvation to the oppressed. And what he threatens and promises, he carries out with mighty power. And he says, I that speak in righteousness, mighty to save. There's only one who is mighty to save. There is no other Lord, no other Savior, nothing. He is Yeshua. And in Revelation 1, he calls himself the Almighty. But when you see that he rides on a white horse, and he's coming with the armies of heaven when he arrives, and he's going to fight the armies of earth. He hasn't done that battle yet. So we can also see a future time in some of these verses as well. Now, see, Kyle and Delish explains this. You know, this is their take on it. This is a striking instance of the bold and abrupt manner of Isaiah. He does not describe him, that is the warrior, as going forth to war, nor the preparation for battle, nor the battle itself, nor the conquests of cities and armies. But he introduces at once the returning conqueror, having gained the victory, here represented as a solitary warrior, moving along with majestic gait from Idumea to his own capital, Jerusalem. Yahweh is not unfrequently represented as a warrior. And the language of the people who see Yahweh returning as a triumphant conqueror from Idumea, struck with his stately, he's bearing, as a warrior with his gorgeous apparel and with the blood on his raiment, and they ask, who could he be? This is a striking incident of the bold and abrupt manner of Isaiah. Well, when you look at it, it's right there in your face, And if we let's look at Isaiah 42:13. The Lord shall go forth as a mighty man. He shall stir up jealousy like a man of war. He shall cry, yea, roar. He shall prevail against his enemies. Yahweh goes forth as a mighty man, as a hero, a warrior. Yahweh shall stir up jealousy like a man of war, rouse his vengeance and indignation. Yahweh shall cry, yea, roar and shout. Yahweh shall prevail against his enemies. Now you see, we're using Yahweh, which is the personal name of God. This is what Judah uses. And so this relates right back to their covenant, right back to who it is that they knew. But see, when we look at Isaiah as well, there are a lot of things in here. This is where we find the Messiah. In Isaiah, we have a picture of the suffering servant. This is not the suffering servant suffering. This is the glorified suffering servant. And that's what Yahshua had to do. He came and suffered, and he died on the cross. He was resurrected from the dead. And by the time John came around to write Revelation, the Lord appeared to him in Revelation chapter 1, and there's a whole introduction of everything he is and who he is. But the one thing he says, I am the Almighty. And he's been given that title by the Father because he's been given exclusive rights, responsibilities, and powers. And the reason he's glorified and he has this is because he came and he defeated sin, death, and the grave, was resurrected from the dead, and he came at the right hand of the Father, and he made intercession for the saints according to the will of God. But then there comes a time for him to move, and, he's in a warrior mode. He's got the time of his redeemed is the key here as well. God isn't always going to be sitting around saying, well, you're all going to die and nothing we're going to do about it. No, there comes a time when the time of judgment comes. And see, the problem with the wicked, they don't ever think it'll come. But there comes a time when you die. But even when you die, that's not the judgment yet. Because Yahshua said when he was here that he would speak and raise the dead, and they would stand before him and he would judge them. Make no mistake, this isn't a game here. Jeremiah 32:19, great in counsel and mighty in work is Jehovah, or Yahweh.
Who was that? What was that last?
Jeremiah 32:19.
Thank you.
Great in counsel and mighty in work, for thine eyes are open upon all the ways of the sons of men, to give to every one according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doings. Now that's Jeremiah 32:19. Jeremiah is the one that is warning Judah. They didn't listen to Jeremiah. They went into captivity, and after 70 years, God delivered them through the hand of Cyrus of Persia. You see? So when we look at this today, we're not looking at that part. That's already occurred. But we see in this that God does one thing. According to the fruit of your doings, that's what God does. And when you're a Christian, you have accepted the Lord, the provision that he has, because he